Picture this, a towering beacon of knowledge, its shelves overflowing with the wisdom of ancient civilizations, standing proudly in the heart of Alexandria. Then, in a matter of moments, flames consume it all. The Library of Alexandria, one of humanity's greatest treasures, vanishes into smoke and legend. But what if I told you its story is far more fascinating and mysterious than most people realize? This wasn't just any library. It was a vault of secrets, a hub of innovation, and a symbol of intellectual ambition so vast it still captures our imagination today. Think about every book you've ever read, every idea that shaped your worldview. Now imagine a single place holding scrolls from across the known world, works by Plato, Aristotle, and countless scholars whose names are lost to time. The Library of Alexandria wasn't just big, it was revolutionary. It housed over 500,000 texts, making it the closest thing the ancient world had to the internet. And yet, its destruction remains one of history's most heated debates. Was it Julius Caesar's fault, a religious uprising, or something even more unexpected? That's what makes this journey so thrilling, because today we're uncovering 10 mind-blowing facts about this legendary place, from its groundbreaking role in science to the shocking theories about how it fell. You'll discover how it shaped the course of human knowledge and why its loss still haunts us. So settle in, because we're about to step back into a world where scholars race to collect every idea under the sun, where fire threatened to erase centuries of progress, and where the echoes of Alexandria's greatness still whisper to us today. This is the story of a wonder that dared to dream bigger than its time, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single detail. Here's something that might surprise you: the Library of Alexandria wasn't just a standalone building filled with scrolls. It was actually the crown jewel of a much larger intellectual powerhouse known as the Mouseion, or the Temple of the Muses. Imagine a sprawling academic campus funded by the wealthiest rulers of the ancient world, the Ptolemaic kings. This wasn't just a place to store books, it was a vibrant hub where the greatest minds of the era lived, debated, and pushed the boundaries of knowledge. Situated in Alexandria's royal quarter near the bustling harbor, the Mouseion was more like an ancient university than a simple library. Think of it as the Harvard or Oxford of its time, except with fewer ivy-covered walls and more marble columns. The scholars who worked here didn't just visit, they were given free room and board, generous stipends, and even tax exemptions. It was a dream come true for intellectuals. They could dedicate their lives to research without worrying about everyday survival, and the setup was nothing short of revolutionary. The Mouseion had lecture halls, gardens for philosophical strolls, and even a communal dining area where thinkers from across the Mediterranean would exchange ideas over meals. But the real star of the show was, of course, the library itself, a meticulously organized treasure trove of scrolls covering everything from astronomy to medicine, poetry to engineering. This wasn't just a collection, it was an aggressive pursuit of universal knowledge. The Ptolemies were so determined to gather every written work in existence that they reportedly seized scrolls from ships docking in Alexandria, copied them, and then, depending on who you ask, sometimes kept the originals and returned the copies. What made this place truly unique was its mission. Unlike other ancient libraries, which were often private or tied to religious institutions, the Mouseion was built for the advancement of human understanding. It attracted luminaries like Euclid, who laid the foundations of geometry there, and Eratosthenes, who calculated the Earth's circumference with shocking accuracy. The idea that a government would pour vast resources into pure scholarship was almost unheard of at the time. So when we talk about the Library of Alexandria, we're really talking about something far grander, a temple of learning where knowledge wasn't just preserved but actively expanded. And that's what makes its loss so devastating, because this wasn't just a building that burned. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of discovery, one that shaped the course of history in ways we're still unraveling today. Now let's talk about sheer scale, because the Library of Alexandria wasn't just impressive for its ideas, but for the jaw-dropping volume of knowledge it housed. Ancient historians like Callimachus, who actually worked there as a scholar and librarian, estimated its collection held over 500,000 scrolls. To put that into perspective, imagine stacking every book in a modern public library, then doubling it. That's how massive this repository of knowledge was. And remember, these weren't just random texts. Each scroll was handwritten, meticulously copied, and often irreplaceable original works by thinkers whose names still echo through history. What's even more fascinating is how the library dwarfed its competitors. Take the Library of Pergamon, another legendary center of learning in the ancient world. While impressive in its own right with around 200,000 scrolls, it was still only a fraction of Alexandria's collection. The Ptolemies, the ruling dynasty behind Alexandria's library, weren't just interested in gathering knowledge, they were obsessed with having the absolute best. And they went to extraordinary lengths to make it happen. One of their most notorious tactics, literally raiding incoming ships at Alexandria's bustling harbor. Picture this: a merchant vessel docks carrying cargo from Athens, Rome, or India. Along with spices and silks, it might have precious scrolls on board, philosophical treatises, scientific manuscripts, or epic poems. Officials would seize those texts, rush them to scribes who'd make copies, and then, well, here's where history gets murky. Some accounts say they kept the originals and returned the copies. Others suggest they sometimes just kept everything, paying the merchants for their loss. Either way, this aggressive approach turned the library into a vacuum cleaner for the ancient world's wisdom. But the methods didn't stop there. The Ptolemies also sent agents abroad with blank checks to buy up entire private collections. They borrowed scrolls from other cities under the guise of copying them, only to forget to return the originals. There's even a story about Athens lending them precious plays by Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, only for Alexandria to keep them and send back copies, forfeiting a massive cash deposit instead. For the Ptolemies, knowledge wasn't just power, it was a trophy, and they played to win. This relentless hunger for texts transformed the library into something unprecedented, a near-complete archive of human thought up to that point. Geography, medicine, astronomy, drama, every discipline was represented. And because scrolls were so labor-intensive to produce, each one was a small miracle of preservation. Losing a single scroll could mean losing an idea forever. That's what makes the scale of Alexandria's collection so staggering. 500,000 scrolls wasn't just a number. It was a safeguard against oblivion, a way to ensure that even if a work disappeared elsewhere, it would survive here. Until, of course, history had other plans. The Ptolemies didn't just collect books, they waged a kind of intellectual heist on the ancient world. Take Ptolemy III, a ruler so determined to stock his library with foreign knowledge that he built an entire wing just for international texts, calling it the Hall of Foreign Books. This wasn't just a gesture of cultural appreciation. It was a calculated move to centralize the world's wisdom under one roof, and the lengths he went to would make even the most ambitious collectors blush. Consider his scheme with Athens, home to some of the most revered manuscripts of the age, original plays by the legendary tragedians Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. These weren't just scripts, they were national treasures guarded fiercely by the Athenians. So Ptolemy offered what seemed like an irresistible deal. He'd pay a staggering deposit of 15 talents of silver, enough to buy a small palace, just to borrow the scrolls and have them copied. The Athenians agreed, likely thinking they'd get both their originals and a fortune in silver back. But Ptolemy had other plans. He kept the priceless originals, sent back copies, and calmly forfeited the deposit as if it were a petty fee. For him, the silver was a small price to pay for owning the authentic words of Athens' greatest minds. This hunger for global knowledge didn't stop with Greek texts. The Hall of Foreign Books became a melting pot of languages and ideas. Teams of scholars worked around the clock translating Hebrew scriptures, Persian astronomical treatises, and even Indian medical texts into Greek. One of the most famous projects was the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, said to have been crafted by 72 Jewish scholars brought to Alexandria for the task. Legend claims they worked in isolation, yet produced identical translations, a divine endorsement of their accuracy. But the real genius of this wing was its recognition that wisdom wasn't confined to one culture. By gathering texts from Persia, India, and beyond, the library became a crossroads of civilizations. Imagine a scholar in Alexandria studying star charts from Babylon, surgical techniques from ancient India, and philosophy from Athens, all in the same afternoon. This wasn't just storage, it was the first great experiment in comparative knowledge, proving that innovation thrives when ideas collide, and that's what made the Hall of Foreign Books revolutionary. In a world where empires often took treasures by force, the Ptolemies used wealth, cunning, and sheer audacity to build something rarer, a sanctuary where the world's voices could speak to one another. The silver they forfeited, the translations they commissioned, it was all part of a grander vision, one that understood true power didn't come from hoarding gold, but from unlocking the secrets of the human experience. The scholars of Alexandria didn't just collect knowledge, they reshaped how humanity understood the universe itself. Picture Eratosthenes, the library's chief librarian, standing in the courtyard around 240 years before the Common Era. With nothing but a stick, a well, and a brilliant mind, he performed a feat that still leaves modern scientists in awe, calculating the Earth's circumference. Here's how he did it. On the summer solstice in Mouseion, sunlight reached the bottom of a deep well, meaning the sun was directly overhead. Meanwhile, in Alexandria, a vertical stick cast a shadow. By measuring that shadow's angle about 7 degrees and knowing the distance between the two cities, Eratosthenes deduced the Earth was a sphere with a circumference of roughly 25,000 miles. The mind-blowing part, he was off by less than 2%. Then there was Aristarchus of Samos, a man centuries ahead of his time. While most of the ancient world believed Earth sat motionless at the center of creation, he dared to suggest something radical, that the planets, including Earth, revolved around the sun. His heliocentric model was met with skepticism, but it laid the groundwork for figures like Copernicus over a millennium later. Imagine the courage it took to challenge the dominant worldview with nothing but observations and mathematics. The library didn't just house his ideas, it gave them space to breathe, fostering an environment where bold thinking could thrive. But perhaps no field advanced more dramatically in Alexandria than medicine, thanks to Herophilus. At a time when dissecting human bodies was taboo, even punishable by death in some cultures, he conducted groundbreaking anatomical studies. Herophilus wasn't just sketching organs. He was the first to distinguish between arteries and veins, identified the brain as the seat of intelligence, and even described the nervous system. His work was so precise that his terms for anatomical structures are still used today. And all of this happened within the library's orbit, where the free exchange of ideas allowed him to push boundaries that would have been unthinkable elsewhere. What made these discoveries possible wasn't just individual genius, it was the library's culture of relentless curiosity. Here, astronomers debated with mathematicians, physicians exchanged notes with philosophers, and no question was too audacious to ask. This was a place where the edges of the known world were constantly tested, where the only limit was the imagination of those who walked its halls. And that's why Alexandria's legacy isn't just about what was lost, it's about how much was found. Because long before modern labs or telescopes, this was where science took its first revolutionary steps. Here's a twist that might shatter everything you thought you knew: the infamous burning of the Library of Alexandria. The one we've all heard blamed on Julius Caesar might not have happened the way history books claim. That dramatic image of flames swallowing centuries of knowledge, it's time to rethink it. because while fire did play a role in Alexandria's story, the truth is far messier and more intriguing than a single act of arson. Let's start with Caesar's alleged crime. In 48 before the Common Era, during his civil war with Pompey, Caesar's forces were besieged in Alexandria. To prevent the enemy fleet from resupplying, he ordered ships in the harbor set ablaze. Ancient writers like Seneca and Plutarch confirm the fire spread to nearby warehouses, likely storing books awaiting transport to the library. But here's the critical detail. None of these first-hand accounts mention the library itself burning. The flames were devastating, yes, but they hit storage depots, not the Mouseion's main halls. So how did Caesar become the villain of this story? Blame later historians like Plutarch, who centuries afterward vaguely suggested the fire may have reached the library. Over time, that uncertainty crystallized into myth. The real decline of the library was less about a single fiery catastrophe and more about slow, grinding neglect. After Rome annexed Egypt in 30 before the Common Era, funding for the Mouseion dried up. Imagine a world-class research center today losing its grants year after year, labs closing, scholars leaving, maintenance crumbling. That's what happened in Alexandria. Without the Ptolemies' lavish support, the library faded from its golden age. Scrolls weren't copied as often, collections stopped growing, and the intellectual heartbeat of the place grew fainter. Then came the final blows. In 272 Common Era, Emperor Aurelian's troops sacked the city during a revolt, damaging the royal quarter where the library stood. But the death knell came in 391, when Christian zealots, encouraged by Theodosius's anti-pagan decrees, destroyed the Serapeum, a temple housing a daughter library. This wasn't just about religion, it was a symbolic strike against Alexandria's legacy as a bastion of pagan learning. By this point, the main library may already have been a shadow of itself, but the attack on the Serapeum scattered or destroyed whatever treasures remained. So why does the myth of Caesar's fire persist? Because it's dramatic. A single villain, a single moment of destruction. It's cleaner than the complicated truth of bureaucratic neglect and ideological purges. But recognizing the library's gradual fall is even more tragic. This wasn't just a building vanishing overnight. It was centuries of brilliance eroding piece by piece, like watching the stars go out one by one. And that's what makes Alexandria's story so haunting. The greatest enemy of knowledge wasn't flame, it was indifference. The story of Alexandria's library takes an unexpected turn with a political betrayal that reshaped its destiny. Picture this: Ptolemy VIII, a ruler so paranoid about threats to his power that he orchestrated a brutal purge of intellectuals in the 2nd century before the Common Era. Scholars who had once thrived under the Mouseion's protection suddenly found themselves exiled or worse, accused of siding with rivals. The vibrant halls of the original library grew quieter as thinkers fled for their lives. But knowledge, it seems, has a way of outlasting even the most ruthless rulers. Ptolemy's response: he built a second library, a grand consolation prize meant to salvage Alexandria's reputation as a beacon of learning. This daughter library rose within the walls of the Serapeum, a magnificent temple dedicated to the Greco-Egyptian god Serapis. Unlike the secluded Mouseion, the Serapeum stood in the city's bustling heart, its columns visible to every passing trader and pilgrim. The choice of location was no accident. By placing the new library in a religious complex, Ptolemy blended scholarship with sacred authority, ensuring it would remain a cultural landmark even as political winds shifted. Over time, as the original library's funding dwindled under Roman rule, the Serapeum's collection quietly took center stage. What's fascinating is how this backup library became a lifeline for Alexandria's intellectual legacy. While the Mouseion scrolls succumbed to neglect or scattered in riots, the Serapeum's trove endured possibly as late as the 4th century. It housed everything from scientific treatises to religious texts, serving as a bridge between eras. Think of it like a time capsule. By the time Christian mobs targeted the Serapeum in 391, it wasn't just a temple they were destroying, it was the last stronghold of a fading world. The irony, Ptolemy VIII's attempt to control knowledge ultimately preserved it. The very scholars he exiled carried Alexandria's ideas to new corners of the Mediterranean, while the Serapeum's library kept the flame alive longer than anyone expected. So when we mourn the loss of the great library, we're really mourning two tragedies, one of sudden violence, the other of slow, stubborn resilience. Because even in its shadow, the daughter library proved something remarkable. Ideas can't be chained to a single building. They outgrow their containers, find new homes, and whisper forward through time. The Ptolemies didn't just want a library, they wanted the ultimate collection, and they played by their own ruthless rules to get it. Ships sailing into Alexandria's harbor didn't just offload spices and silks. They carried something far more precious to the city's rulers: knowledge. And the moment those scrolls touched Egyptian soil, they were fair game. Officials would seize any texts on board, rush them to scribes for copying, and then, depending on who you ask, either return the copies or, conveniently, lose the originals altogether. This wasn't just borrowing, it was state-sanctioned intellectual piracy, all in the name of amassing the world's greatest repository of wisdom. But the most infamous example of this cunning strategy involves Athens, home to some of antiquity's most celebrated plays. The Ptolemies had their eyes on the original manuscripts of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, works so revered that Athens guarded them like crown jewels. So Ptolemy III devised a scheme worthy of a heist film. He offered the Athenians an astronomical sum as collateral, 15 talents of silver, just to borrow the scrolls temporarily for copying. The catch: he never intended to give them back. When Athens demanded their treasures returned, they received meticulously crafted duplicates instead, and the silver was forfeited without a second thought. To the Ptolemies, it was a simple trade: wealth for immortality. What makes this even more intriguing are the whispers that these copies weren't entirely faithful. Some ancient sources hint that scribes may have introduced subtle errors, altering lines or omitting passages to suit Alexandria's political or cultural tastes. Imagine the outrage in Athens when scholars unrolled their original plays only to find lines rewritten or scenes missing. It's as if someone swapped the Mona Lisa with a nearly perfect replica, except the smile was just slightly off. This wasn't just about hoarding knowledge, it reflected a deeper philosophy. The Ptolemies believed that controlling the physical originals meant controlling history itself. By holding the master copies, they could shape how future generations interpreted these works, and in a world without printing presses or digital backups, owning the original scroll was as close as you could get to owning the idea. Yet for all its audacity, this policy had an unintended consequence. The very act of copying these texts, however questionable the method, saved countless works from oblivion. Many originals would have crumbled to dust in less climate-controlled libraries, while Alexandria's duplicates survived long enough to be recopied again and again. So while the Ptolemies' tactics were anything but ethical, they inadvertently became the villains who preserved the very treasures they stole. Imagine walking into the largest library in the world, only to find no system for locating anything. Scrolls piled high with no way to distinguish a medical treatise from an epic poem. For most ancient libraries, that chaotic reality was the norm. But the Library of Alexandria revolutionized how knowledge was organized thanks to an ingenious scholar named Callimachus and his monumental creation, the Pinax. This wasn't just a list of titles, it was the ancient world's answer to a search engine, a 120-scroll masterpiece that transformed how humanity accessed information. Callimachus, a poet and the library's chief bibliographer, approached scrolls like a detective solving a mystery. His Pinax, meaning tablets in Greek, did something unprecedented. It categorized every work in the library by genre, then by author, complete with biographical sketches and detailed summaries. Picture this: a scholar walks in asking for texts on astronomy. Instead of wandering hopelessly, they consult the Pinax, which directs them to a specific section, lists relevant authors, and even provides context about each work's significance. It was metadata before the word existed, a system so advanced it would feel familiar to anyone using a modern library database or even a Google search today. What made the Pinax revolutionary wasn't just its scope but its philosophy. Callimachus understood that knowledge was only as powerful as its accessibility. By including biographical notes, he gave future readers crucial context, like understanding that a medical scroll was written by Hippocrates' student, not the master himself, or that a disputed text might be a later forgery. These weren't dry catalogue entries, they were bridges between the reader and the distant mind behind each scroll. The influence of this system echoes across millennia. Today's ISBN codes, library classification systems like Dewey Decimal, even the way Netflix organizes its genres, all owe a debt to Callimachus' vision. He proved that information, no matter how vast, could be tamed with the right structure, and that's why the Pinax might be Alexandria's most enduring innovation. Because while fire could destroy scrolls, it couldn't erase the idea that knowledge deserved order, a lesson we're still relearning every time we type a query into a search bar. One of the most frustrating gaps in our understanding of the Library of Alexandria isn't just about what it contained, but where it actually stood. For all its fame, no one has ever uncovered definitive traces of its structure. The irony is almost poetic. A place that meticulously catalogued the world's knowledge has itself been lost to history's clutter. Modern Alexandria thrives as a bustling Mediterranean port, its streets and buildings layered over the ancient city like a palimpsest, erasing the very ground where scholars once walked. Excavating here isn't just difficult, it's often impossible. Imagine trying to dig up downtown Manhattan to find a single building from the 1700s. That's the challenge archaeologists face. The royal quarter, where historians believe the Mouseion and its library were located, now lies beneath densely populated neighborhoods and centuries of construction. Ground-penetrating radar and limited digs have turned up tantalizing hints. A section of Ptolemaic-era masonry here, a fragment of inscribed stone there, but nothing conclusively tied to the library itself. This hasn't stopped scholars from piecing together theories. Some argue the library was part of the Mouseion's main complex, a grand hall with towering shelves and reading niches. Others suggest it stood as a separate structure nearby, possibly connected to the royal palace for security. Then there's the debate over its size. Was it a single vast chamber or a network of specialized rooms for different subjects? The truth might be a mix, an evolving space that grew and adapted over centuries, making a single blueprint impossible to pin down. Recent underwater explorations near the harbor have added another layer of intrigue. Divers have uncovered massive stone blocks, statues, and even what appear to be collapsed columns, remnants of the ancient city's shoreline, which sank after earthquakes and rising sea levels. A few bold researchers speculate these could be traces of the library's annexes or storage facilities, swept into the sea during one of Alexandria's many disasters. But without inscriptions or clear architectural links, these remains whisper possibilities rather than answers. What makes this mystery so compelling is the contrast between our certainty about the library's impact and our uncertainty about its physical form. We can map the stars as Eratosthenes did, yet we can't say for sure where he stood when he did it. Perhaps that's fitting for a place that was never just about walls and scrolls, but about the boundless space of human curiosity. The library's true architecture wasn't stone or wood. It was the interconnected world of ideas it housed, a design too vast to ever fully excavate. 2,000 years after the original's demise, something extraordinary rose near Alexandria's ancient shores, a sweeping modern temple of learning called the Bibliotheca Alexandrina. Opened in 2002, this architectural marvel isn't just a nod to history. It's a bold reimagining of the original library's spirit for the digital age. Designed by Norwegian firm Snøhetta, its iconic tilting roof evokes a sun rising over the Mediterranean, while its vast granite walls are carved with letters from every known alphabet, a visual reminder that knowledge has no borders. Step inside and the parallels deepen. Just as the ancient library sought to gather all the world's texts, this billion-dollar successor houses millions of books across a labyrinth of specialized collections. There's a library for the visually impaired with braille and audio collections, a youth section buzzing with interactive displays, and even a trove of rare manuscripts painstakingly restored. But the real showstopper, the library's digital ambitions. Teams of archivists are scanning ancient Coptic texts, digitizing Arabic scientific treatises, and partnering with global institutions to create a virtual archive accessible to anyone, anywhere. It's as if the Ptolemy's dream of universal knowledge has finally leapt off papyrus and into the cloud. Yet the Bibliotheca Alexandrina isn't just preserving the past, it's reigniting the original library's role as a crucible for discovery. Its planetarium hosts astrophysics conferences where researchers debate black holes under a domed sky. Artists in residence reinterpret ancient myths through holograms and AI. Even the controversies feel familiar. When the library digitized centuries-old Islamic manuscripts, it sparked debates about cultural ownership eerily reminiscent of Alexandria's ancient scroll disputes. What makes this modern incarnation so powerful is how it transcends nostalgia. The original library burned, but the idea behind it, that knowledge should be collected, shared, and challenged, never did. By blending cutting-edge technology with the timeless hunger to understand our world, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina proves that some flames never go out. They just find new fuel. The legacy of the Library of Alexandria isn't just in the scrolls it lost, it's in the very way we think about knowledge itself. For centuries, this extraordinary place proved that ideas could transcend borders, that curiosity was worth funding, and that humanity's collective wisdom deserved a sanctuary. Think of the breakthroughs born within its walls: the earth measured, the stars mapped, the human body understood in ways that wouldn't be matched for over 1,000 years. These weren't just discoveries, they were leaps forward in the human story, all made possible because Alexandria dared to gather the world's minds under one roof. But here's what's truly staggering. The library's influence didn't vanish with its physical form. Its model of centralized learning, of translation, of scholars debating across disciplines became the blueprint for every great university and research center that followed. From Baghdad's House of Wisdom to modern institutions like the Library of Congress, the ghost of Alexandria lingers in every place that treats knowledge as a public good rather than a private treasure. Even the internet, with its promise of universal access to information, echoes the Ptolemy's dream on a scale they couldn't have imagined. Which makes you wonder, what if the flames had never come? If those 500,000 scrolls had survived, along with the countless works we know were lost forever, how much further might we have traveled by now? Would Hipparchus' star catalogues have led us to telescopes centuries earlier? Could Herophilus' anatomical studies have accelerated modern medicine? It's not just about the answers we lost, it's about the questions we never got to ask. The library's destruction didn't just erase books, it stole timelines of progress, leaving gaps in understanding that took millennia to bridge. So here's a thought to leave you with: if Alexandria had endured, would we have reached the stars by now? Or would its survival have reshaped history in ways we can't even picture? The truth is, we'll never know. But what we can do is honor its spirit by visiting the new Bibliotheca Alexandrina online, by sharing which of these facts stunned you most, and by remembering that every library, every classroom, every spark of curiosity is part of the same unbroken chain. Because the real lesson of Alexandria isn't about what was lost, it's about how much we still have left to find.